მაგრამ მე კიდევ ერთხელ მინდა მოგმართოთ. შემოძვირფასებო, შემოთანამე მომული. მე ძალიან მიყვარს ოსი ხალხი. როგორც პრეზიდენტს და როგორც ერთ-ერთი ადამიანს. მე ძალიან დიდი თაყვანისმცემელი პატრიოტიზმელი ვარ, ოსური კულტურის, ოსური ისტორიის, ისინი თქვენ ყველა ეთნიკური ოსი საქართველოში არის საქართველოს ისტორიის განუყოფელი ნაწილი, მრავალი საუკუნის განმავლობაში. ჩვენ ვამაყობთ თქვენით. და ჩვენ ვამაყობთ ამ ჩვენი ერთობით. საქართველოს ძლიერია თავისი მრავალფეროვნებით. საქართველოს არ არის არასდროს არ იქნება მონოლითიკური ქვეყანა, ერთი ეთნოსის ქართველების ქვეყანა. საქართველოს გვეყოთის ყველა ჩვენ. თანაბრად მიუხედავად ჩვენ წარმომავლობისა. და მოდით ერთად გავუფრთხილდეთ ჩვენ ქვეყანას. მოდით ერთად ავაცილოთ მას თავიდან ძალადობა. მოდით ერთად ვიმუშაოთ უკეთესი მომავალისკენ. მოდით გადავუსვათ ხაზი ყოველგვარ უარყოფით წარსულში და ვიფიქროთ ჩვენ საერთო მომავალს.
August 8, 2008 became another tragic date on the global calendar. The opening of the Olympic Games in Beijing was pushed to the sidelines when it became known that hundreds of civilians were killed on the night of 7th to 8th of August in South Ossetia, the unrecognized Russian-protected part of Georgia. Whereas in the past centuries, all wars ceased during the Olympic Games, now it became clear that the New World Order shall not accept these conventionalities, as well as other conventions like those of a presidential promise to stop the shooting. On August 7th, at about 5 or 3 p.m., Saakashvili made a television address and he said to the Ossetian people that he would stop fighting and they should do the same. Saakashvili said that back then, he agreed to negotiate, etc. In a word, this relaxed the people. I went to sleep calmly. It was about midnight that the shooting started, and it was terrible. We are about to prove that what happened with South Ossetia and its 120,000 residents on the 8th of August was a war crime. In the civilized world, it is a rule to try rulers responsible for massacres of civilians and genocide by court-martial. The Georgian army received the order to attack the sleeping Tskhinval from President Mikheil Saakashvili. But who does Saakashvili himself receive orders from? Who finances the Georgian army? Who supplies Georgia with state-of-the-art military equipment? Why were there Afro-American mercenaries in NATO uniform found among the killed aggressors? Who in South Ossetia was the fifth column, a traitor that opened the door to the enemy? And why did the war in Ossetia dramatically reverse the course of the presidential election campaign in the United States, making the radical Russophobe McCain lagging behind Barack Obama before the war lead?
Russia is using violence against Georgia.
The South Ossetia attack operation was titled Clean Field. This was certainly the best option for Georgia. They want the land without us. They simply want this territory. He wanted to kill us all, everyone. He said that he did not want the people here, only the land itself. He wanted this land for the Georgian people to live on, while we would have been buried in it. Ex facto, this aggression seems to be an attempt by Georgia to take control of the territory of South Ossetia by force. They planned a one-day blitzkrieg to enter the Roki tunnel and to present the world community with an accomplished fact. If there is no man, there is no problem. If there is no population of South Ossetia, no one to upset the plans of capturing the fertile lands. They knocked on the basement doors. They said, "Come out, you Ossetians. Come out. The Russians will not help you." However, that small victorious war went wrong. It was already in the evening of August 8th that the Russian army entered South Ossetia through the Roki tunnel, and by August 10th, had already forced the Georgian aggressors back to Kokoity. It was only then that the world community noticed that an irreparable event took place in the Caucasus.
The United States of America stands with the democratically elected government of Georgia. Today, we are all Georgians.
Right now, we're focused very heavily on getting Russian forces out of Georgia.
However, to the global public opinion, it was the Russian intervention into the conflict between Georgia and South Ossetia, rather than the genocide of Ossetians and killing of Russian peacekeepers, that was considered irreparable. The victims of the Georgian aggression were generally civilians, farmers, whose only weapons were shovels and rakes. I ran out and saw an old man, 94 years old, being shot point blank. What was he guilty of? Crimes are usually committed at night, and all witnesses are eliminated. This time was no exception. However, Georgian soldiers were so proud of their man-hating mission that they recorded the attack on the peaceful city and killing of its residents with their own cell phone cameras. Therefore, we now possess ample evidence of war crimes committed by the Georgian army. This video shows them already advancing inside. We can see indiscriminate shooting. Please note there's a car, the Vaz 2107 in that place, and he fires 3 times from a grenade launcher directly into this car. Please note that the machine starts to burn. There was a family of 3 people in it. The soot you can see is generated by the very automatic mounted grenade launcher. It is in this car that the Drusoyev family tried to escape from the enemy occupied the city. The woman managed to jump into the car and watch the Georgian soldiers burn her husband, Mair, and their 2 children, 14-year-old daughter Dina, and 15-year-old son, Aslanbek. The grandfather of these children, Zaur Drusoyev, no longer sees any point in living. My children were all very beautiful. I was happy and proud of my children. They were so beautiful, so young and capable. On the 8th of August, when the shooting quieted down a little bit, my son said, Dad, I may manage to sneak through and go to the North Caucasus. He put the children into the car, but it was even before he managed to leave the city that a tank appeared going directly towards them. They fired point blank and killed all my children. They had it their own way. They burned everything. Such atrocities. A car is not a combat vehicle. The specific features of South Ossetian territory imply that there are Ossetian villages bordering with Georgian villages. In peacetime, these two peoples lived together on a small plot of land in a perfectly neighborly way. That the sudden disappearance of Georgian women and children a few days before the attack on Tskhinval did not go unnoticed. The Georgians started evacuating women and children from their villages on the 5th of August. The number of buses passing the peacekeeping checkpoint, Bo Perspire, only on August the 5th, numbered 96. This meant that it was not just a partial outflow, but a total evacuation of the population. To reiterate, the Georgian side had evacuated their women and children 3 days before the war began. The role intended for its male population will be described later. This means that Georgia started preparing for the attack on Ossetia beforehand, and even took commendable care of its civilians. Civilian Ossetians, however, were supposed to suffer quite a different fate. 4 hours before the attack, President Mikheil Saakashvili caught them off guard, foisting upon them his deep love for the Ossetian people, and alleged unwillingness to unleash a war. Those who believed Saakashvili had to pay for it with their lives. These are also our dead teachers. All of them were respected, honored people. Here you are, an honored teacher, another honored teacher, and one more honored teacher. This is Mrs. Karaoli. She was Georgian. She was a wonderful woman. We do not see any difference between origins. We are very international people. We love everyone. We love both Russians and Georgians. Here we are, Mrs. Chitaya was Armenian. She was my dear, wonderful Armenian teacher. Tanks, shooting, airstrikes. All this is terrible. It is terrible even if you are a president, even if you are surrounded by a dozen strong bodyguards. When interviewed after the attack on Tskhinval, Mikheil Saakashvili panicked at the sound of an aircraft flying. Apparently, the president was afraid of assassination. Therefore, Saakashvili ran for shelter before the very eyes of the journalists. Scared to death, Saakashvili hid behind his guards in flak jackets. He did that because an air raid is a terrible thing, because one shell can tear you to pieces. However, this was a false alarm. No one was flying to kill Saakashvili. Still, on August 8th, the army of Mikheil Saakashvili came to kill civilians of Tskhinval. Ossetian men joined the militia and tried to protect the city. However, none of the Ossetian women, children, and elderly people had bodyguards. Hundreds of them were killed in their homes and in the streets, either shot at close range or burned by the Georgian aggressors. Those people whose houses did not have basements had to enter the neighbors. So many people gathered in the basements, they had to stand and sit for days in turn. There were up to 100 people here. The last day was almost unbearable. It was impossible to turn. We stood like this. One could hardly breathe here. It was terrible in here. Killing Tsar Kozayev and Sanakoyev was not a combat operation. It was pure sadism of beasts, driven mad by impurity and the taste of blood. Alzamas and Nugzar left their village for Tskhinval to save the sister of one of them from the city seized by the enemy. He said it would be safer here in the village. After that, at 3 p.m., Georgians captured the village. They were numerous. They were shooting, entering every house, surrounded all the houses, and they shot into all the houses. In Tskhinval, the sister Inga could not leave the basement, where she was hiding with other Ossetians, and meet her brother because of the continuing fighting, and that saved her life. On the way back, Nugzar and Alzamas were stopped by Georgian soldiers and were brutally murdered. It was an atrocious murder. His left hand in the forearm was broken. I saw it myself. There was a fracture of the right foot, a large incision between the first and the second toes of the right foot, and multiple injuries. There were also stab wounds in the stomach, and most likely, his jaw was broken. There was a dent right here. I have never even read about such atrocious murders in books, or seen anything of the kind in movies. British Foreign Secretary David Miliband urged Russia to present proof of the Georgian aggression.
And that is something very serious, not just for Georgia. It is very serious for Russian reputation around the world.
We hope Mr. Miliband will see this film containing exhaustive video evidence of the Saakashvili regime's war crimes. However, we leave open the possibility that David Miliband, Condoleezza Rice, John McCain, or any other Western politician might be too busy to see the film. Therefore, we ask everyone who considers that this film contains enough facts proving the guilt of the Saakashvili regime in initiating the war in the Caucasus to send the film to the official addresses of distinguished politicians. Clean Field Operation was aimed at clearing the Ossetian territory of Ossetians. The small and wayward people were struck by the whole might of the Georgian army. Hooting, posing on cameras, and cheerful, Georgian troops destroyed the stele with the Ossetian ornament and the name of the capital of South Ossetia, Tskhinval, on it, in an attempt to wipe out even that symbol of Ossetian independence. The Ossetians say that their war of independence with Georgia has lasted for 18 years already with varying success. Sometimes combat activities have intensified. Sometimes for long months they have been receding. The most difficult period for Ossetians was between 1989 and 1992. Indeed, such cruelty towards the Ossetians could be found in almost all Georgian villages. However, Ededvi is probably the most terrible village. It was in Ededvi that in 1991 a whole bus of passing Ossetians were buried. They were forced out of the bus and then buried alive. They were basically all elderly people. There were several young people, but mostly they were elderly. And it was long after that that they themselves had been telling others about the moving ground. For them, This is already a nationalistic pathology. That is, for them, it was a kind of victory celebration, or a demonstration of their power, to bury a living person and not to repent. Constant provocations and attacks on the Ossetians have made the situation in the Caucasus region very hair-trigger. In words of Al Capone, a kind word and a gun can help you achieve much more than just a kind word. Georgia made sure that a gun only does not bring the desired results. Therefore, in 2006, a plan for the diplomatic capture of Tskhinval was launched. This implied bribing the Ossetians, promising them a bright future, and using other kind but hollow words. Once the Ossetians had chosen and unfavored by the Georgian president Eduard Kokoity, a so-called alternative presidential election of the unrecognized Republic of South Ossetia was held in the village of Kurta. As a result of this election, former defense minister of South Ossetia, Dmitry Sanakoyev, was elected as the alternative president. The Ossetians explained that Sanakoyev went over to the Georgians for money to pay for the debts he incurred because of a heavy addiction to gambling. Sanakoyev launched a bribing campaign among the residents of Ossetia. For this purpose, cinemas and swimming pools were built in several villages, and new housing was offered for those swearing loyalty to the new pro-Georgian authorities. The construction of a new housing complex in Kokoity was completed today, and I'm proud to report that we have decided to give the apartments in this house to those most desperately in need of housing. These are 30 families that have recently voluntarily agreed to leave Tskhinval and settle here, on the territory controlled by the legitimate authorities. However, the number of those who believe Sanakoyev's promises proved insufficient to peacefully seize the power in the Republic. The Ossetians themselves believe they have two presidents, Eduard Kokoity and the Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev. The fact is that the majority of Ossetians have Russian passports. As for Dmitry Sanakoyev, the residents of the Republic consider him nothing but a traitor. When the attempt to form a fifth column failed, Georgia decided to proceed with the clean field plan. South Ossetia was meant to be devastated by clear-up operations. Its residents were supposed to bury their dead, and a team of Dmitry Sanakoyev was intended to take over the major offices and pass the wayward republic under control of Mikheil Saakashvili. At present, Tskhinval is still unable to answer the most important question. When will a normal, happy, peaceful life begin? A life without duties and trenches, without night shooting, without fear of traveling outside the city? We know the answer to this question. We are building a peaceful Ossetia and a strong Georgia. The prosecutor's office of South Ossetia found a number of trucks filled with uniforms of the new Sanakoyev administration. Apparently, the regime of Saakashvili was so confident of the success of the Blitzkrieg in South Ossetia that they even took the trouble to provide for a neat and tidy look of the new pro-Georgian administration of a devastated Tskhinval. Moreover, special new emblems were designed for special task forces of the new administration, those in the Ministry of Internal Affairs and of the Center Anti-Terrorist Units. The Ossetian prosecutor's office believes that the so-called Center of Anti-Terrorist Units of the Dmitry Sanakoyev's administration are directly responsible for the organization of terrorist acts. A detailed analysis of all the documents suggests that essentially it was not an anti-terrorist organization, but rather a terrorist one. We have their manuals. It's enough to look at what they were taught, laying mines and demolition works. There is enough material proving that they were taught to carry out terrorist acts of sabotage, taught how to behave during mopping up operations. Here you are. This is an instruction manual describing how a team should behave during an urban mopping up operation. A number of terrorist attacks took place in South Ossetia on the 3rd of July and on the 1st of August. The chief of the local village police office, Dmitry was blown up in his house. Several civilians were killed. I would like to show you a report for the Minister of Internal Affairs of South Ossetia, Karkusov, to the head of the Anti-Terrorist Center, Captain Tskhinvali. It reads as follows. For the courage and dedication in discharging his functions during the events of July 3rd and August 1st, 2008, toward the officer of Cat of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of South Ossetia, Chief of the 3rd Police Division, Lieutenant Saakashvili, with a bravery medal. Here is his personal album. He has been somewhere in Kosovo. He has been even to the Pankisi Gorge, visited the Kodori Gorge. Here he is in Kosovo as part of KFOR. Here he is with German instructors, graduates from a NATO school. This is why people are sent here, into the counter-terrorist group. This means that, in fact, the President of Georgia and Georgian authorities decorate their officers with government awards for murdering innocent civilians. Plans of new terrorist attacks were also discovered by the Ossetian prosecutor's officers in the vaults of the so-called anti-terroristic center, CAT. Sanakoyev's officers filmed the supports of the gallery leading to the Roki tunnel. Judging by the thorough attention they paid to each detail, soldiers of the alternative president planned to blow up this gallery. If this had happened, the road between Russia and South Ossetia would have been blocked, and Russian troops would have been unable to come to the aid of the Ossetians and Russian peacekeepers. For some reason, this attack failed, as well as a bacteriological attack on Tskhinval that was to be implemented prior to the Georgian attack. A plan called Sushakuri was found in the safe of the members of the counter-terrorist center. In Georgian, Sochukari means a gift. This cynical gift to the residents of Tskhinval implied poisoning the city's water supplies with typhoid bacteria and was meant to prevent the population from resisting the aggressor. There's the main water pipeline coming from the city. There are storage pools to accumulate water. Then it flows to the city. The task was to poison these pools. And what is more, nobody was allowed to approach the springs in the city by such a fire barrier. When they did not succeed in poisoning the water, provocators blew up the water pipeline. Barbarity of Georgia is a pathology. It should be studied by biologists. On the 8th of August in the evening, they drained an irrigation canal, and a flood began. That means, in addition to all the horrors of war, people were in the water up to their knees. At 1 p.m., the 8th of August, when Ossetian militiamen were fighting to the bitter end for the city and villages, when the Republic's streets were still filled with blood and civilians were hiding in crammed up and flooded basements, Georgian protege Dmitry Sanakoyev proposed to the Ossetians to surrender and leave Tskhinval, and their lives would have been saved. Today we agreed to and declared a moratorium on shooting from the Georgian side from 3 till 6 p.m. That's why I address myself to all those who are armed in the city now. If you have a possibility to lay down your arms and get out in the Erganeti direction, everybody will be guaranteed an amnesty. Nobody will be persecuted, and no one will be shot at the checkpoints. To propose the city defenders to leave is a strange declaration coming from a person calling himself President of Ossetia. And even more, the promise of safe passage corridor has become one of the greatest betrayals of the war. The prosecutor's office has to determine who announced to civilians hiding in basements that they could save themselves by taking the Zakarskaya road from South Ossetia to North Ossetia, which was Russian territory already. Many people who took this corridor were killed on the Zakarskaya road, where Georgian soldiers ambushed them. Marfa Gioeva, with her family, also was going to escape by this road, but a journalist who was in her house at the time called Moscow and found out that there was no such corridor, and the family stayed in the basement. They betrayed the people. There were many in the city whom they betrayed like this, and the people were going to escape, and they were shot. It would be wrong to consider that the war that was launched in the Caucasus on the 8th of August 2008 was only between two countries, Georgia and South Ossetia. The Georgian military were supplied with weapons by 15 countries: the USA, Bulgaria, Hungary, Greece, Latvia, Lithuania, Turkey, France, Czech Republic, Estonia, Israel, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and Ukraine supplied weaponry, military equipment, and ammunition. The Georgian army received about 300 armored personnel carriers from the NATO countries. 100 tanks were to be delivered. Besides, Georgia received 67 artillery pieces, 99 mortars, 150 anti-tank missile systems, 200 portable anti-aircraft units. The French Air Force is going to deliver 4 Mirage fighters. The American side was to supply 15 Black Hawk helicopters. The Georgian Navy received 2 naval ships and 6 gunboats, 10 missile-armed patrol ships. Ukraine, not being a NATO member, supplied Georgia with more than 90 APCs, 10 EL-29 aircraft, 4 helicopters, and 10 Akasia air defense systems. The biggest suppliers were the United States and Ukraine. I don't know what Americans are thinking about. They got into everything. What is Bush doing? He's a complete scoundrel. I would bite him to death. There are 3 people: Saakashvili, the Ukrainian president, and Bush, who should be hanged. Goddamn Saakashvili. Goddamn those countries which supplied weapons to Georgia to annihilate our long-suffering nation. Condoleezza Rice comes to a democratically false country. Let her come here also. It will take her only an hour. It takes only an hour to get here from Tbilisi. Let her come here and see firsthand what the Georgians did against our peaceful nation. The Georgian soldiers were trained by foreign instructors, and mercenaries from other countries came to Georgia to support its army in the war against Ossetia. I'm speaking about the instructors who trained so-called anti-terrorist agents. Here we see that Israeli instructors are training them in shooting and marksmanship. These are Yankees. They're dancing. A dance of Tbilisi thieves is the name of this dance. Kintauli. Kinto means thief in Georgian. Well, it's evident that he isn't a Georgian, since a black never is Georgian. There aren't any blacks in Georgia. I saw many foreign citizens in uniform. There were even blacks. Snipers from the Baltics, soldiers from Ukraine. You know everything about Ukrainians. They not only supplied weapons, but shot down Russian airplanes with their Buk air defense systems, and they also took part in the street fighting. Ukraine supplied cannon fodder for the Ossetian war. Soldiers from the UNSO, Ukrainian National Self-Defense, were being trained to support Saakashvili while on a pleasure trip to the Caucasus. Now our friends, some of them generals of the Georgian army, call us and say that the situation is difficult again, and they need our help. If we have to take up arms, we will do it in the combat zone. I suppose that there will be a few hundred Ukrainians who would like to go and relax in the Caucasus, just like in 1993. Nowadays, we still call it going to a resort. But the fighting spirit of the Georgian military and headhunters from other countries didn't remain for long. The 15th Russian Army took the side of the Ossetians, and the Georgian army fled cowardly, throwing away their documents, arms, NATO-packed lunches, and peacekeeper stripes. The shortest funny story is that Georgian is a warrior. Comrades, Georgians are good soldiers. We will come to check them. The 71st Guard Motor Rifle Regiment. Because of the ambitions of Mikheil Saakashvili and his puppets, not only South Ossetia suffered, but Georgia as well. If earlier, despite all confrontations, Georgians and Ossetians could live in neighboring villages, now Georgians from South Ossetia have no home to return to. Their houses in Ossetian territory were burned down. However, women and children from these houses didn't suffer. We remind you that Georgia evacuated them from the dangerous territory on the 5th of August, 3 days before the assault on Tskhinval. Georgians left these villages not because of the Ossetians' attacks, but as a result of the military operation launched by the Georgian side. To all appearances, they left everything in their houses because they were going to return with a victory, and then most likely to drive the Ossetians off. Men from these villages participated in killing Ossetians. These two-faced people, who sold tomatoes and cucumbers in Ossetian markets, took up arms and went to kill their neighbors, whom they knew. Set us afire. But it was them who taught us to do it. They taught us to burn houses down as early as in 1992. As early as 2005, the Georgian Interior Ministry issued about 200 automatic assault rifles to Georgian villagers. The rifles were hidden to the moment when the order to start a fratricidal war would come from Georgia. This is a journal for registered weapons given out in Georgian villages, which were under Georgian control. It was in the region under Sanakoyev's administration. There are about 1,000 units of weapons, automatic assault rifles and machine guns. Look at it, please. We translated it. This is a receipt. I, Mikheil Arsenovich Ogidze, a resident of Kokoity region, Samarasheni village, signed this document and I have to take care and be responsible according to the law for damage or loss of this automatic assault rifle AK-47 given me by Putin's Internal Affairs Department of the Georgian Medvedev. The receipt was written by me. Signature 13/04/2005. The originals are here. Here they are. So it means that actually all grown-up men were armed. And today, when we are told that we should permit refugees to return, of course we will solve this problem. But taking into account that there are no guarantees that these people didn't participate in combat operations and their hands are covered with blood. Georgian peacekeepers also proved to be two-faced people. We were shown trenches and fortifications above Ededvi village that Georgian soldiers began to make 3 weeks before the attack on Tskhinval. Here you can see the direction of the fire. Villages Dmitry, Kokoity, Roki. Do you think that nobody noticed the 3-week fortification construction work? No. But responsible international operations didn't give a damn about an imminent deadly threat to Ossetia. When Georgia brought tanks here, the OSCE came as well as European observers. That is, maybe they came, looked at all this and went away. And then all this construction began. But then, no European observers came. Each fortification, each dugout, each fortified trench, and each cabin. We knew about everything and spoke about this, and there wasn't any reaction. Later, ripped-off stripes of Georgian peacekeepers were found at the place of the fortifications. It was Georgian peacekeepers who shot civilians. But when it was getting really tough, they dropped all this evidence, Ukrainian morphine, and the NATO packed launchers, and left their emplacements. There were Georgian peacekeepers near this road. Peacekeepers were laying there, and they were firing. Peacekeepers? Yes, of course, they were shooting. Who else? Later, they had NATO uniforms, helmets, automatic assault rifles, boots, complete NATO uniforms. But the part the USA played in this conflict was the most important and fatal for South Ossetia. The United States stuffed Georgia with weaponry, advisors, instructors, and mercenaries. There was a joke in the Caucasus that George Bush had confused Georgia, the state of the USA, and the Republic of Georgia, because in English, they're called the same. And as Chekhov wrote, if there was a gun on stage, it surely would shoot. As far as I know, at least 127 advisors from the US Defense Department were working there. On August 7th, exactly the same day when Georgia launched its attack, large-sized joint American-Georgian military exercises had just been held. About 1,000 American soldiers had taken part in these exercises. Apropos, it had a distinctive name, immediate response. So Georgians, trained by American colleagues, immediately made use of their recent training. Saakashvili's regime and his sponsors prepared not only a military invasion of Ossetia, but also an information war. After the Russian army forced back the Georgian aggressors, Western politicians fanned up Russophobia.
Russia has damaged its credibility.
U.S. presidential nominee Senator McCain went so far as to put Georgians in the Red Book.
So why we should care about the conflict between Georgians and the Russian army? Georgia itself, my friends, had long and remarkable history. It was a 4th century convert to Christianity, one of the first nations on earth.
It is easy to explain McCain's rhetoric. The U.S. presidential post is at stake. In spite of the all-out economic crisis in America, it's worth fighting for this post till the end, even if it'll be the end of one small republic. Before the West lowered the boom on Russia, John McCain had conceded the initiative to his contender Democrat Barack Obama. Now, what could raise the popularity rating of this radical militarist, a Russian threat? Just exactly what all Western media howled about after the Caucasus War. Proved to be a very good injection for McCain's rating.
Russian actions in clear violation of international law have no place in 21st century Europe.
1 week after Georgia's incursion into Ossetia, the rating of Republican McCain went up, and for the first time in this campaign, leveled out with Democrat Obama's rating, and then gained a few points. Now let's see how the rough information war was unleashed in the so-called Democratic mass media. Russia's invasion of Georgia represents the most serious challenge to this political order since Slobodan Milosevic unleashed the demons of ethnic nationalities in the Balkans. What is happening in Georgia today, therefore, is not simply a territorial dispute. It is a struggle about whether a new dividing line is drawn across Europe between nations that are free to determine their own destinies and nations that are consigned to the Kremlin's autocratic orbit. Today's Russia now stands revealed as a bully, wrapped in nationalism and cloaked with its leader's arrogance. Prime Minister Vladimir Putin's adventure in Georgia has produced shock and awe at the sight of tanks, planes, and warships mobilized against a small neighbor. Did Russia attack Georgia? Do you still think so? Most likely not. But probably you have a question. Why Russia came to protect South Ossetia? But Saakashvili's regime, killing 66 Russian peacekeepers and 1,692 Russian citizens, committed a crime against Russia. These peacekeepers are called peacekeepers because they mustn't shoot them. Some of our citizens hid there, hoping that they wouldn't be attacked. But they attacked and inflicted airstrikes on whatever they liked. The peacekeeper's mission is to support peace in conflict regions. To kill a peacekeeper is a serious war crime. Even 10 years ago, a weakened Russia might have accepted this blow, but modern Russia is not going to put up with wrong. For each crime, Russia has an adequate response. On the 8th of August, the South Ossetian Press and Information Committee broadcast an appeal from Republic citizens to President Dmitry Medvedev. We should remind you that the majority of Ossetians have Russian passports and citizenship. These Russians appealed to their president from Tskhinval's basements to save their lives, their homes, and their republic. Georgia's acts have caused loss of life, including among Russian peacekeepers. The situation reached the point where Georgian peacekeepers opened fire on the Russian peacekeepers with whom they're supposed to work together to carry out their mission of maintaining peace in this region. Civilians, women, children, and old men are dying today in South Ossetia, and the majority of them are citizens of the Russian Federation. In accordance with the Constitution and the federal laws, as President of the Russian Federation, it is my duty to protect the lives and dignity of Russian citizens wherever they may be. This war has split the Caucasus. Russia and South Ossetia have lost their citizens. Georgia has lost the possibility to join NATO because of the unresolved territorial conflict. Saakashvili's regime has lost the last trust of the Georgian people. South Ossetia has won its independence, but paid too high a price for it, the price that it was forced to pay. Such a terrible bombing. Look at the city. What does it look like? They used multiple rocket launchers. And what did we have? We didn't have anything, even against the tanks. It wasn't a war. What kind of war was that? To come into a village to the people who have a spade or a hose in the so-called war? Really, they were scorched fields, as they called it, clean fields, sweeping everything away, leaving nothing, not even the people of this nation. Nobody fights like this. They are cowards. They attacked old men and women. They are cowards indeed. The task is not to sympathize with us or express a favorable attitude. The task is that this must not happen again, anywhere. That's why international organizations should stay, analyze what happened, and do everything for it not to happen again, so that South Ossetia becomes the last place where such murderous deeds were carried out. In short, we saw Armageddon. Everybody is afraid of Armageddon, but we saw it.